Hi all, and welcome back to Tangents on Cracked Spines. Sorry, it's been a minute. Things have gotten a little hectic in my life, and I was sick last weekend. But I am not restarting this book. We are continuing. Anyways, hi. Thank you for coming back. If you're new here, maybe go back. I think this is the 4th episode, so go back 3 other episodes to begin at the beginning of the story, which happens to be Bram Stoker's Dracula. With that being said, what do I do here? I read things in the public domain. Books that are in the public domain are not necessarily age appropriate or necessarily appropriate for anyone. Whenever I know that there's going to be problematic scenes coming up, I will try to put a disclaimer. But I cold read these. I have read Dracula before, but that doesn't mean I remember when things happen. It's called Tangents on Cracked Spines. I go on squirrel hunts. Tangents are part of my, MO? I can't think of the word right now. I'll think of it halfway through the story and scream it out. Don't worry. Yes, I'll go on another tangent because of it. Why is my camera so close to my face? For those watching this, I apologize that I did not pause to readjust. Yeah, and again, listener discretion is advised. Public domain means that it was written ages ago, at least 100 years ago. That makes it possibly less appropriate for more people. They were graphic. They were detailed. They did not consider some things as terrible as we do now. So I will attempt to let people know when things happen. If not, always read the description. The description will tell you.
It's been almost 3 weeks, and this is part 4.
This is, according to my mother, it is part 4, and it has been just about 3 weeks since I've uploaded a video. I apologize about that. I'm not sure if I've introduced myself. This is my second take because a cat interrupted me. So yeah. I said that if I wound up having to stop again, I would just move on to another book. I am not letting this one take me down. I know where I left off last time. So I will... That's why I'm so close. I keep leaning forward like I'm talking to a friend.
We are talking to a friend.
Sure. My mom calls you friends. Are you my friend? Let me know in the comments, because you can comment no matter where you're listening to this. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, for some reason it doesn't like verifying who I am anymore, so I know nothing about those stats. I mostly look at my Spotify stats and my YouTube stats. But that does not mean that I don't want you to comment and rate and all that stuff on Amazon and Apple and wherever else you can find this. Also, unintentional, I'm wearing cats sleeping on books with tea earrings. And book, cat off screen, tea. It's been 4 minutes and I haven't even gotten to the premise yet. Haha. And where did we leave off? We left off with Jonathon Harker being like, hey, this is no longer a business trip. The Count is fishy. There's no one else in this house. He's the one doing all of the cleaning and cooking and preparing of my meals. He's talking to me exclusively at night. He's made me nocturnal. Am I being overly suspicious? I'm not allowed in any of the doors that are locked. Guess what? All of them are locked, including the front door. Help! Let's begin.
Yeah.
12 May. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm Frankie. You hear in the background my mother making occasional comments, not helping my tangents. And I am still sick, so you will have some occasional snorting. I am sorry, and my voices may be worse than usual. Let me begin with facts. Bare, meager facts, verified by books and figures, and of which there can be no doubt. I must not confuse them with experiences, which will have to rest on my own observation, or my memory of them. Last evening, when the Count came from his room, he began by asking me questions on legal matters, and on the doing of certain kinds of business. I had spent the day wearily over books, and simply to keep my mind occupied, went over some of the matters I had been examined in at Lincoln's Inn. There was a certain method in the Count's inquiries, so I shall try to put them down in sequence. The knowledge may somehow or sometime be useful to me. First, he asked if a man in England might have 2 solicitors or more. I told him he might have a dozen if he wished, but that it would not be wise to have more than one solicitor engaged in one transaction, as only one could act at a time, and that change would be certain to militate against his interest. He seemed thoroughly to understand, and went on to ask if there would be any practical difficulty in having one man to attend, say, to banking, and another to look after shipping, in case local help were needed in a place far from home of the banking solicitor. I asked him to explain more fully, so that I might not by any chance mislead him, so he said, "I shall illustrate. Your friend and mine, Mr. Peter Hawkins, from under the shadow of your beautiful cathedral at Exeter, which is far from London, buys for me through your good self my place at London. Good. Now, here let me say frankly, lest you should think it strange that I have sought the services of one so far off from London, instead of someone resident there, that my motive was that no local interest might be served save my wish only, and as one of London residents might, perhaps, have some purpose of himself or friend to serve, I went thus afield to seek my agent, whose labour should be only to my interest. Now, suppose I, who have much of affairs, wish to ship goods, say, to Newcastle, or Durham, or Harwich, or Dover, might it not be that it could be more ease be done by consigning to one in these ports?" I answered that certainly it would be most easy, but that we solicitors had a system of agency one for the other, so that local work could be done locally on instruction from any solicitor, so that the client, simply placing himself in the hands of one man, could have his wishes carried out by him without further trouble. "But," said he, "I could be at liberty to direct myself. Is it not so?" "Of course," I replied, "and such is often done by men of business who do not like the whole of their affairs to be known by any one person." "Good," he said, and then went on to ask about the means of making consignments, and the forms to be gone through, and of all sorts of difficulties which might arise, but by forethought could be guarded against. I explained all these things to him to the best of my ability, and he certainly left me under the impression that he would have made a wonderful solicitor, for there was nothing that he did not think of or foresee. The man's pretty bloody old. He better have some foresight by this point. Although, I mean, age does not always bring wisdom. By the way, in my own life, I'm reading The Lord of the Rings. So, talk about age not necessarily bringing wisdom. For a man who was never in the country, and who did not evidently do much in the way of business, his knowledge and acumen were wonderful. Speaking of which, if he's never been to England, how did he find a solicitor back then? It's not like he could Google it. I mean, I know he had like, business directory, but, like, Jonathon said, it was quite outdated. When he had satisfied himself on these points of which he had spoken, and I had verified all as well as I could by the books available, he suddenly stood up and said, "Have you written your first letter to our friend Mr. Peter Hawkins, or to any other?" It was with some bitterness in my heart that I answered that I had not, that as yet I had not seen any opportunity of sending letters to anybody. "Then right now, my young friend," he said, laying a heavy hand on my shoulder, "write to our friend and to any other, and say, if it will please you, that you shall stay with me till a month from now." "Do you wish me to stay that long?" I asked, for my heart grew cold at the thought. "I desire it much. Nay, I will take no refusal. When your master, employer, what you will, engaged that someone should come on his behalf, it was understood that my needs and only were to be consulted. I have not stinted. Is that not so?" What could I do but bow acceptance? It was Mr. Hawkins' interest, not mine, and I had to think of him, not myself. And besides, while Count Dracula was speaking, there was that in his eyes and in his bearing which made me remember that I was a prisoner, and that if I wished it, I could have no choice. The Count saw his victory in my bow and his mastery in the trouble of my face, for he began at once to use them, but in his own smooth, resistless way. "I pray you, my good young friend, that you will not discourse of things other than business in your letters. It will doubtless please your friends to know that you are well, and that you look forward to getting home to them. Is it not so?" As he spoke, he handed me 3 sheets of notepaper and 3 envelopes. They were all of the thinnest foreign post, and looking at them, then at him, and noticing his quiet smile with the sharp canine teeth lying over the red underlip, I understood as well as if he had spoken that I should be careful what I write, for he would be able to read it. So I determined to write only formal notes now, but to write fully to Mr. Hawkins in secret, and also to Mina, for to her I could write in shorthand, which would puzzle the Count, if he did see it. When I had written my 2 letters, I sat quiet, reading a book, whilst the Count wrote several notes, referring as he wrote them to some books on his table. Then he took up my 2 and placed them with his own, and put by his writing materials, after which, the instant the door had closed behind him, I leaned over and looked at the letters, which were face down on the table. I felt no compunction in doing so, for under the circumstances, I felt that I should protect myself in every way I could. One of the letters was directed to Samuel F. Billington, No. 7, The Crescent, Whitby, another to Herr Lieutenant Wagner, the third to Coates and Coat, London, and the fourth to Herren Klopstock and Bilrath, Bankers, Budapest. I know you don't pronounce the TH. I bet. The second and fourth were unsealed. I was just about to look at them when I saw the door handle move. I sank back in my seat, having just had time to replace the letters as they had been, and to resume my book before the Count, holding still another letter in his hand, entered the room. He took up the letters on the table and stamped them carefully, and then, turning to me, said, "I trust you will forgive me, but I have much work to do in the private this evening. You will, I hope, find all things as you wish." At the door he turned, and after a moment's pause said, "Let me advise you, my dear young friend, nay, let me warn you, with all seriousness, that should you leave these rooms, you will not by any chance go to sleep in any other part of the castle. It is old, and has many memories, and there are bad dreams for those who sleep unwisely. Be warned. Should sleep now or ever overcome you, or be like to do, Then haste to your own chamber or to these rooms, for the rest will then be safe. For your rest will then be safe. But if you be not careful in this respect, then... He finished his speech in a gruesome way, for he motioned with his hands as if he were washing them. I quite understood. My only doubt was as to whether any dream could be more terrible than the unnatural, horrible net of gloom and mystery which seemed closing around me. Later. I endorse the last words written, but this time there is no doubt in question. I shall not fear to sleep in any place where he is not. I have placed the crucifix over the head of my bed. I imagine that my rest is thus freer from dreams, and there it shall remain. When he left me, I went to my room. After a little while, not hearing any sound, I came out and went up the stone stair to where I could look out toward the south. There was some sense of freedom in the vast expanse, inaccessible though it was to me, as compared with the narrow darkness of the courtyard. Looking out of this, I felt that I was indeed in prison, and I seemed to want a breath of fresh air, though it were of the night. I am beginning to feel this nocturnal existence tell on me. It is destroying my nerve. I start at my own shadow, and am full of all sorts of horrible imaginings. God knows that there is ground for my terrible fear in this accursed place. I looked out over the beautiful expanse, bathed in soft yellow moonlight, till it was almost as light as day. In the soft light the distant hills became melted, and the shadows in the valleys and gorges of velvety blackness. The mere beauty seemed to cheer me. There was peace and comfort in every breath I drew. As I leaned from the window, my eye was caught by something moving a story below me, and somewhat to my left, where I imagined, from the order of the rooms, that the windows of the Count's own room would look out. The window at which I stood was tall and deep, stone mullioned, and, though weather-worn, was still complete, but it was evidently many a day since the case had been there. I drew back behind the stonework and looked carefully out. What I saw was the Count's head coming out from the window. I did not see the face, but I knew the man by the neck and the movement of his back and arms. In any case, I could not mistake the hands which I had so many opportunities of studying. I was at first interested and somewhat amused, for it is wonderful how small a matter will interest and amuse a man when he is a prisoner. But my very feelings changed to repulsion and terror when I saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and began to crawl down the castle wall over that dreadful abyss, face down, with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings. At first I could not believe my eyes. I thought it was some trick of the moonlight, some weird effect of shadow. But I kept looking, and it could be no delusion. I saw the fingers and toes grasp the corners of the stones, worn clear of the mortar by the stress of years, and by thus using every projection and inequality move downwards with considerable speed, just as a lizard moves along a wall. Pause. Sorry, as I said, I'm sick. Needed to deal with my nose. Where was I? Oh yeah, because if he didn't make the lizard comment, I was going to.
Huh?
He had said, Dracula was moving down the side of the wall like a lizard. What manner of man is this, or what manner of creature is it in the semblance of man? I feel the dread of this horrible place overpowering me. I did press play, right? Yes. That's the reason I stopped reading this the first time, was I had done an hour-long reading and didn't realize I hadn't pressed record. I feel the dread of this horrible place overpowering me. I am in fear, in awful fear, and there is no escape for me. I am encompassed with the terrors that I dare not think of. 15th May. Once more I have seen the Count go out in his lizard fashion. By the way, I like lizards, but I figured that's the right inflection given that he is the prisoner of the Count. And thoughts of it, 1800s. I mean, there's a reason mustard seed was called Eye of Newt. Da, 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 da. He moved downward in a sidelong way, some 100 feet down, and a good deal to the left. He vanished into some hole or window. When his head had disappeared, I leaned out to try and see more, but without avail. The distance was too great to allow a proper angle of sight, especially considering it was dark out. I knew he had left the castle now, and thought to use the opportunity to explore more than I had dared to do as yet. I went back to my room, and taking a lamp, tried all the doors. They were all locked, as I had expected, and the locks were comparatively new. But I went down the stone stairs to the hallway where I had entered originally. I found I could pull back the bolts easily enough and unhook the great chains. But the door was locked and the key was gone. That key must be in the Count's room. I must watch should his door be unlocked, so that I may get it and escape. I went on to make a thorough examination of the various stairs and passages, and to try the doors that opened from them. 1 or 2 small rooms near the hall were open, but there was nothing to see in them except old furniture, dusty with age and moth-eaten. At last, however, I found one door at the top of the stairway which, though it seemed to be locked, gave a little under pressure. I tried it harder, and found that it was not really locked, but that the resistance came from the fact that the hinges had fallen somewhat, and the heavy door rested on the floor. Here was an opportunity which I might not have again, so I exerted myself, and with many efforts forced it back so that I could enter. I was now in a wing of the castle further to the right than the rooms I knew, and a story lower down. From the windows I could see that the suite of rooms lay along to the south of the castle, the windows of the end room looking out both west and south. On the latter side, as well as to the former, there was a great precipice. The castle was built on the corner of a great rock, so that on 3 sides it was quite impregnable. And great windows were placed here where sling or bow or culverin could not reach, and consequently light and comfort, impossible to a position which had to be guarded, were secured. To the west was a great valley, and then, rising far away, great jagged mountain vastness. I would expect that to say vastness, but no, it does have an F in it. Rising peak on peak, the sheer rock studded with mountain ash and thorn, whose roots clung in cracks and crevices and crannies of the stone. This was evidently the portion of the castle occupied by the ladies in bygone days, for the furniture had more air of comfort than any I had seen. The windows were curtainless, and the yellow moonlight flooding in through the diamond panes enabled one to see even colors, whilst it softened the wealth of dust which lay over all and disguised in some measure the ravages of time and the moth. My lamp seemed to be of little effect in the brilliant moonlight, but I was glad to have it with me, for there was a dread loneliness in the place which chilled my heart and made my nerves tremble. Still, it was better than living alone in the rooms which I had come to hate from the presence of the Count. And after trying a little to school my nerves, I found a soft quietude come over me. Here I am, sitting at a little oak table where in old times possibly some fair lady sat to pen with much thought and many blushes to her ill-spelt love letter, and writing in my diary in shorthand all that has happened since I closed it last. It is 19th... Helps if I get the right page. 19th century, up to date with a vengeance. And yet, unless my senses deceive me, the old centuries had, and have, powers of their own with their own which modernity could not kill. Modernity. Later, the morning of 16th May. My birthday! God preserve my sanity, for to this I am reduced. Safety and the assurance of safety are things of the past. Whilst I live on here, there is but one thing to hope for, that I may not go mad, if indeed I be not mad already. If I be sane, then surely it is maddening to think that of all the foul things that lurk in this hateful place, the Count is the least dreadful to me. That to him alone I can look for safety, even though this be only whilst I can serve his purpose. Great God, merciful God, let me be calm, for out of the way lies madness indeed. I begin to get new lights on certain things which have puzzled me. Up to now, I never quite knew what Shakespeare meant when he made Hamlet say, "My tablets, quick, my tablets! 'Tis meet that I put it down," etc. For now, feeling as though my own brain were unhinged, or as if the shock had come, which must end it in its undoing, I turn to my diary for repose. The habit of entering accurately must help to soothe me. The Count's mysterious warning frightened me at the time. It frightens me more now when I think of it, for in future he has a fearful hold upon me. I shall fear to doubt what he may say. When I had written in my diary and had fortunately replaced the book and pen in my pocket, I felt sleepy. The Count's warning came to my mind, but I took a pleasure in disobeying it. The sense of sleep was upon me, and with the obstinacy which sleep brings as outrider. The soft moonlight soothed, and the wide expanse without gave a sense of freedom which refreshed me. I determined not to return tonight to the gloom-haunted rooms, but to sleep here, where, of old, ladies had sat and sung and lived sweet lives, whilst their gentle breasts were sad for their menfolk, in the midst of remorseless wars. Cringe, 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 cringe. I drew a great couch out of its place near the corner, so that, as I lay, I could look at the lovely view to east and south, and unthinking of, and uncaring for, the dust, composed myself for sleep. I suppose I must have fallen asleep. I hope so. But I fear, for all that followed was startlingly real, so real that now sitting here in the broad, full sunlight of the morning, I cannot in the least believe that it was all sleep. I was not alone. The room was the same, unchanged in any way since I came into it. I could see along the floor in the brilliant moonlight my own footsteps marked where I had disturbed the long accumulation of dust. In the moonlight opposite me were 3 young women, ladies by their dress and manner. I thought at the time that I must be dreaming when I saw them, for though the moonlight was behind them, they threw no shadow on the floor. They came close to me, and looked at me for some time, and then whispered together. 2 were dark, and had high aquiline noses, like the Count, and great, dark, piercing eyes, that seemed to be almost red when contrasted with the pale yellow of the moon. The other was fair, as fair can be, with great wavy masses of golden hair, and eyes like pale sapphires. I seemed somehow to know her face, and to know it in connection with some dreamy fear, but I could not recollect at the moment how or where. All 3 had brilliant, bright white teeth that shone like pearls against the ruby of their voluptuous lips. There was something about them that made me uneasy, some longing, and at the same time some deadly fear. I felt in my heart a wicked, burning desire that they would kiss me with those red lips. It is not good to note this down, lest someday it should meet Mina's eyes and cause her pain. But it is the truth. They whispered together, and then they all three laughed. Such a silvery, musical laugh. But as hard as though the sound could never have come through the softness of human lips. It was like the intolerable tingling sweetness of water glasses when played by a cunning hand. The fair girl shook her head coquettishly, and the other two urged her on. One said, "Go on, you're first, and we shall follow. Yours is the right to begin." The others added, "He is young and strong. There are kisses for us all." I lay quiet, looking out under my eyelashes in an agony of delightful anticipation. The fair girl advanced and bent over me till I could feel the movement of her breath upon me. Sweet it was in one sense, honey sweet, and sent the same tingling through the nerves as her voice, but with a bitter underlying the sweet, a bitter offensiveness as one smells in blood. I'll just finish this chapter up. I was afraid to raise my eyelids, but looked out and saw perfectly under the lashes. The girl went on her knees and bent over me, simply gloating. There was a deliberate voluptuousness which was both thrilling and repulsive. And as she arched her neck, she actually licked her lips like an animal, till I could see in the moonlight the moisture shining on the scarlet lips and on the red tongue as it lapped the white sharp teeth. Lower and lower went her head as the lips went below the range of my mouth and chin and seemed about to fasten on my throat. Then she paused, and I could hear the churning sound of her tongue as it licked her teeth and lips, and could feel the hot breath on my neck. Then the skin of my throat began to tingle as one's flesh does when the hand that is to tickle it approaches nearer. Nearer. I could feel the soft, shivering touch of the lips on the supersensitive skin of my throat, and the hard dents of two sharp teeth just touching and pausing there. I closed my eyes in a languorous ecstasy and waited with beating heart. But at that instant, another sensation swept through me, quick as lightning. I was conscious of the presence of the Count, and of his being as if lapped in a storm of fury. As my eyes opened involuntarily, I saw his strong hand grasp the slender neck of the fair woman. With giant's power, draw it back. The blue eyes transformed with fury. Sorry, the cackle was completely out of place with the story and the scene. But I recently bought a tent for my vendor event, and I haven't gotten it outside yet, the box for it. And Mineki decided to go in it, but she seems confused about how long it is. So she is in it and unable to get out. Unless she lets herself slide all the way to the end, and I don't think she has. Back into the seriousness. Where was I?
Count.
Yes, I know the Count. As my eyes opened involuntarily, I saw his strong hand grasp the slender neck of the fair woman with giant's power, draw it back, the blue eyes transformed with fury, the white teeth chomping with rage, and the fair cheeks blazing with passion. But the Count! Never did I imagine such wrath and fury, even to the demons of the pit. Ooh, she got out. The cat, not the lady. Never did I imagine even to the demons of the pit. His eyes were positively blazing. The red light in them was lurid, as if the flames of hellfire blazed behind them. His face was deathly pale, and the lines of it were hard like drawn wires. The thick eyebrows that met over the nose now seemed like a heaving bar of white-hot metal. With a fierce sweep of his arm, he hurled the woman from him. Then he motioned to the others, as though he were beating them back. It was the same imperious gesture that I had seen used to the wolves. In a voice which, though low and almost in a whisper, seemed to cut through the air and then ring around the room, he said, "How dare you touch him, any of you? How dare you cast eyes on him when I had forbidden it? Back, I tell you all. This man belongs to me. Beware how you meddle with him, or you'll have to deal with me." The fair girl, with the laugh of ribald coquetry, ribald, turned to answer him. "You yourself never loved. You never love." On this, the other women joined, and such a mirthless, hard, soulless laughter rang through the room that it almost made me faint to hear. It seemed like the pleasure of fiends. Then the Count turned, after looking at my face attentively, and said in a soft whisper, "Yes, I too can love. You yourselves can tell it from the past. Is it not so? Well, now I promised you that when I am done with him, you shall kiss him at your will. Now go! I must awaken him, for there is much work to be done." "Are we to have nothing tonight?" What was that accent? "Are we to have nothing tonight?" said one of them, with a low laugh as she pointed to the bag which he had thrown upon the floor, and which moved as though there were something living thing in it. For answer, he nodded his head. One of the women jumped forward and opened it. If my ears did not deceive me, there was a gasp and a low wail, as of a half-smothered child. The women closed round, whilst I was aghast with horror. But as I looked, they disappeared, and with them the dreadful bag. There was no door near them, and they seemed simply to fade into the rays of the moonlight, and pass out through the window, for I could see outside the dim, shadowy forms, for a moment before they entirely faded away. Then the horror overcame me, and I sank down unconscious. And with that, we'll end for the night. This was supposed to be a short episode, but I got carried away. Thank you all for listening. As all podcasts have to say, you know the drill. If you enjoyed this, please share it with friends and family, or anybody you think would enjoy this. Like, comment, review. What?
I should donate.
Oh. Yeah. I do have a Ko-Fi and a couple of other things if you like this enough to part with your hard-earned money. It would help me have provide more regular updates, because I wouldn't be relying on my data plan. I could get some crappy rural internet, and or fix my car. I need brakes. I would like to not get hurt because my brakes went on me. But again, I get it. I understand money is hard to come by right now. So, and I don't really have anything to provide you. Like, I don't have a Patreon. You would just get more of these episodes, and I wouldn't have to get advertisers, maybe. But don't worry, that won't be for a while. I don't meet the qualifications. All of the important information will be in the description below. I think that's everything. If you have suggestions for the next book, we just finished chapter 3, so it's going to be a hot minute before we finish Dracula. But if you have ideas for the next book, let me know. I'll consider them. That's the other thing. Donating would help me purchase books to read. Yeah, thank you all for listening, and